Welcome back into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luca. Luca, we have made it to a game week. The Bills have a game this coming Saturday against the Chicago Bears at 1 p.m. in Highmark Stadium. Can you feel the hype of preseason game number one?
Yeah, hype. I don't know if that's how I describe it here. I have well documented on how I feel about preseason games and stuff. Although I will say, Josh, this might shock you a little bit. I did tune in to watch the Hall of Fame game. Now, it's for quite literally the reason that I think anyone else did, the kickoff, and just to see what
Oh, I thought you
people
meant
did.
betting.
No, no, God, no. Oh my goodness, I do not put a penny on anything preseason. That seems crazy to me. Although I've heard these rumblings that preseason overs are easy money. I don't know. And again, I'm not going to put money on games that don't matter. But no, the new kickoff rule is why. So in that same light, I will be paying attention or trying to, although this Saturday might be a little difficult. There's a wedding I have to attend and I'm actually involved in, standing in, I should say. I'm not involved. I'm happily married already, obviously. But it's that week, but I'll probably during that day, because that's later on, I'll at least turn it on, or it will be on wherever we're at. And I want to see how the Bills handle the kickoff. But overall, I mean, that's where it all ends for me. Oh, it's preseason football, Josh. But at least it's a game. We're getting to a game. I'm excited to be here to talk about it like it's a game day week. And it's a step forward in the positive direction here, because that just means, Josh, we're one game closer to the regular season, and then when things actually finally matter.
Yeah, it's funny, and actually, this wasn't where I wanted to start the show, but since we're talking about, I mean, we can go out of order a little bit. It's fine. Let's start with the preseason game because I'm like you. I have plans on Saturday, and these are plans that involve family that I can't be like, hey, I can't come to your baby shower because the Bills play a preseason game against the Bears. Luckily for you and I, we record on Sunday nights, and I will have time to watch the game, and I will watch it back. I promise. But my interest in preseason in this new world that we're living in, the Josh Allen world, is one, no injuries. And then two, I find it interesting to find out like who's playing where. I'm curious, like how much playing time does Alec Anderson get? Because it sure feels like he's like the sixth man on the offensive line. He's playing that heavy tackle role that the Bills will go in jumbo. What does Cam Lewis do? Is Cam Lewis exclusively playing safety like he's been doing the last couple practices since Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards went out? How much playing time does Kaiir Elam get? I mean, you could see a scenario where Rasul Douglas just sits because, like, why do you need him in this game? So stuff like that interests me. If Josh Allen happens to play, I always find it interesting, like what players got playing time with him. Outside of that, though, there's not a whole lot of value to take from this. I guess, the snarky side of me would like to see Tyler Bass, make some kicks because I think that'll be important, particularly in Buffalo. He missed a kick in the blue and red game and got booed. It was a 58-yard kick. He missed it pretty badly. But I think that'll be something. I'd like to see Tyler Bass have a good preseason. I want to talk about how much Josh Allen should play in these preseason games. And when we get past this preseason game tonight, we're going to talk about the state of the safety position. There's been a couple of injuries there. There's been a couple of players brought in. There's been a player on the roster moved from cornerback to safety. We'll talk about what that's looking like, what we think that's going to look like come opening day against the Cardinals. I want to talk about a couple of guys on this roster that maybe some folks had written off. Maybe written off both of these guys, Von Miller and Kaiir Elam, both having very strong camps. And what is the ceiling for those players? And what could that mean for the ceiling of the Bills? We're going to get into that. And then at the end of the show, Luke and I are going to have some fun with the NFL Top 100 and then some Madden ratings that came out this week and just talk about our thoughts on lists like that, the value they have in the space, and how much value we place on that. Let's start with the preseason, though, Luca, because I feel like as a fan base, we need this preseason game. And you and I were talking about this a little bit off the air. I'm a little bit more on the Twitter than you are. If you see Bill's Chat post something on Twitter, there's a 95% chance I'm the one who posted it. But I can just tell by some of the takes that are out there from people that I respect, people that I consider friends, that we need a preseason. We need something other than the Bills playing against themselves at St. John Fisher. Because I've seen just, I don't want to say anything like specific, but some overly optimistic takes about how good the weapons are going to be, and some thoughts about the defense. Thad Brown put out a tweet today from Rochester saying like, "Hey, Keon Coleman struggled to get open, but he's kind of been like just as advertised. He's hasn't really created a lot of separation. He makes contested catches, been reliable." Like just a tweet that should not have been any kind of an eye opener. And I go in just to see what the comments are. The first comment was, "Well, he's going against a top 5 defense every day. So what do you expect him to do?" And Thad's like, "They're not even a top 3 defense in their own. They're not even a top 2 defense in their own division." Like, no disrespect, but like, no, can we just live in reality? I think we need, I think Luka Bills fans need to take a breath. It's like we've all forgotten how to preseason and training camp. Stay healthy, don't get anybody hurt, and hope that the guy you like at the bottom end of the roster makes the team, and then just get to week 1, because the second the Bills and the Cardinals play one single snap, you won't give a damn about anything that happened back at St. John Fisher.
1000%. And it's, we're in those paper times. You live in your paper verse. You're in your own ideal headspace as a fan. So whoever the individuals are that are kind of clapping back in the ways that they feel are needed, you know, the one you bring up is just a pure example of it, where it's like, I mean, let's live in reality here. Let's be honest with ourselves. If you really just sit back and read it through and think it over, that is not the case. It's not that. I think that I believe you mentioned that. It's like, yeah, clearly, like the Jets defense stands on its own in this division. There's a reason Josh Allen has struggled mightily against it comparative to anyone else in the league. And then on top of that, Miami defense isn't half bad. New England's defense isn't half bad. Like, there is the AFC East as a division is loaded with talented defense. That's the reality of it. And for instance, not to even kind of like sway too much, but New England, I'm pretty confident the way they want this year to work is they don't care what happens on offense. They don't have anything really to care about there. They're just going to be, Jared Mayo is going to be building that defense. And it's just going to be all about getting that defense working. And you're probably going to see a lot of box scores, at least in the second half of the season, where they're losing games 17-13 or some BS scoreline like that. Like, it's all going to be about that, because hopefully then Drake May and whatever else they keep building on offense progresses and moves forward from there as they build up that roster. So realistically, that's not a half bad defense. And the Bills defense isn't bad, but it's like, let's not sit here and live in this bubble that feels so great that we're a top 5 D. It's like, no, right now we're talking about how we lost 2 potential starting safeties, and now you have a corner moving back to safety. It's like, as if you just want to talk about defense, I don't feel confident that if Cam Lewis is sitting there at starting safety, that we're a top 5 defense. And I don't think that reality would be that. And it'd be unfair to have that expectation for them as well. I think that is another thing in this conversation. It's almost like you're setting yourself up for when in week 7, you're like, how the hell is this Bills defense sitting in 12th in the league or whatever it is? And you're just disappointed in that. It's like, well, you set that baseline, you set that bar way too high on no example or reason or cause for why it should have been there in the first place. Like, it was just in your head. You imagine it to be that way. It's, yes, I'm with you. I think Bills fans in general just need a game. I think all NFL fans, though, I don't think it's just a Bills thing either.
Right. Yeah.
You hear this conversation among all 32 fan bases. This is that time. This is when it's all stewing the right way. This is when everyone has that pot of optimism and everyone just loving what they're seeing in practice, what they're seeing in scrimmages, joint practices, if they're doing as such. Like, this is when you start getting like, hey, maybe we could crack the playoffs, or hey, maybe we could make a run in the playoffs, whatever, whatever the optimistic viewpoint is for your team and wherever you stand. Like, if you're a Tennessee Titan fan right now, yes, they've had certain things, but then they just signed Quandre Diggs, I believe, today. And you're like, you know what? Maybe if Will Levis can keep building on himself, this receiving core isn't too bad. Like, this is that time of year. So yes, you just need games. So then you can start to see a little bit of something. And then, as you pointed out so perfectly, once the first snap of week 1 happens, you don't remember any of that stuff that you were talking about there. And that's when reality hits you very, very quickly. And yeah, we also need that. So let's just continue to be neutral in this. Be happy to be Bills fans and where we are comparative to a lot of other fan bases. But overall, let's just be neutral, not set unrealistic expectations, not have unrealistic, needs out of anyone specifically or as a positional group. And let's just get to week 1 as a happy crew where we can enjoy regular season football coming back in 2024.
Kyler Murray drops back on first down, throws a 15-yard pass to McBride on Taylor Rapp, and you will forget every nice thing you've ever thought about Taylor Rapp, and you will say, oh my God, we are so screwed without Hyde and Poyer.
Well, it's so hard when you're defending against a top 3 tight end in the league.
Not according to Madden. He's not even in the top 10, Luca.
And he's not.
I think he's excellent. But hey,
he's good. But still.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What should the Bills' plan be in preseason? And I know we talk about this every year, but I think this year is even a little bit more unique because you do have the aspect of, and I'm talking specifically with Josh Allen here, because he's the superstar on offense. What should the Bills do with Josh Allen in preseason, Luca? On one hand, there's no need to play him at all. What are we doing? Let's get him to the first game. That's the best way to guarantee he's healthy is we're going to take him out of an opportunity to get hit in live game action against other teams, particularly against players who might be trying to make a name for themselves. The other hand, Josh Allen has one receiver on his roster this year that he's completed a regular season pass to. Do you really want him going into week 1 against Arizona, having not played against other teams, throwing a ball to these players? Where do you fall on the what should Josh Allen's plan be in preseason?
I'm a no position changed here. I get, and it's the first time we've had now and really this new, probably 4 years of Josh Allen, where Josh Allen finally became a little bit of himself, right? 2019, it was still rough around the edges a little bit but 2019 to 2023, we obviously saw a Josh Allen where it's like, okay, he's finally number 1, he's QB1, and he's excelled from there. This is the first time where now there are the question marks about his receivers, like you're bringing up, where he hasn't had game time with these individuals. He hasn't seen it at game speed in any capacity of what these guys can do against how he's going to see them, whatever it is. How is he going to see the field with these new guys he's throwing at? But I don't care. Josh Allen's Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen will be able to figure out. I would rather it be a little rough around the edges come weeks 1, 2, and 3, even though the games matter, just because you're ensuring that he's safe. If you want to throw him in for a drive with all of your starting offensive line, of course, like as it always has and always will be with anyone starting QB, you always make sure all your protection is also there. But from there, it's simplistic in itself. You're just going through the motions. There's nothing that he needs to do when it comes to extending plays or doing anything like that, of course. Like, you are just, 1, 2, 3, drop back, hit it, and just off your plant foot. It's done. It's done. You're just running real basic stuff, keeping him in the rhythm, get the rust off, nothing more. If you do anything more than that, that's where I become concerned. Like, I don't even want to see them go as far as they did in the Pittsburgh preseason game last year, where the starters were out there for a significant number of minutes. Yeah. It just felt unnecessary. And overall, it's just like, I get that you want to get live reps and you can't simulate game speed. Preseason's not game speed to me, though. It almost, I'm not saying it's going to present itself some, false speed to it, or it's going to hinder anything. I do think there is value in it for a lot of stuff, but the one individual that I care the least about when it comes to preseason action to have that game speed action is Josh Allen, and I'm very, very okay with that. I think he's good enough that he can figure it out even when the games start mattering. That's fine. I think he is capable of elevating people around him, and as long as you have that ability, you're A-okay, and I don't think preseason snaps are going to make any difference realistically.
You mentioned that Pittsburgh game. He threw 10 passes in that game. And the week after against Chicago, Also on the road, he threw 7 passes. Now, if you remember that game against Chicago, which if you don't feel bad because I barely do, but I remember the offense like came out on the first drive and looked super, super crisp. And I believe he only played 1 drive. I think it was like bing, bang, boom, bomb, like we're good.
Yeah.
It's funny they start off Pittsburgh, Chicago again, only in a different order. Um, I I really want to talk about who is it here? Jack's point here, and I think maybe you'll like it. You won't agree with it, but I think you'll hear where he's coming from. Jack Wakeham says, I'm first and foremost a rugby fan, and I've always found NFL preseason weird. In rugby preseason, it's all about getting your team up to proper game speed. To do that, starting players, and then we ran out of room on this, but starting players basically have to play at full speed. They have to hit. And he ended it by saying, if it's your time, it's your time. If you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. Let's not try to like avoid it. I hear
Sure.
where he's coming from. And I do think there's a reason why 2 years ago in one of our first seasons of Bill's Chat Pod, the Steelers were on the road playing Cincinnati. Bengals were favored by a touchdown. Mitch Trubisky was starting the game, and you're like, no, the Steelers are going to win that game. I was like, you're nuts. Like, no, week 1 Steelers. Now, last year, Steelers got pounded by the Niners. We got it. Week 1 Steelers, they are notorious for hitting as hard in camp as any team in the league, playing preseason as hard as you can. So week 1 comes, they are lathered up and they're ready to hit. I get where he's coming from, but I will just say you're setting yourself up, even if it's your time is your time and all that stuff. Any injury that happens in preseason feels so avoidable. And you mentioned it, Luca. It's not just Josh Allen. If Josh Allen's on the field, it also means Deion Dawkins better be on the field. Spencer Brown better be on the field. Torrance and Edwards and McGovern better be on the field. Some version of Knox and Kincaid, 2 good enough receivers, and James Cook, whatever. It can be a running back, you'll be fine. But you have all your guys out there, and you'd hate to have that be the moment that something goes wrong and you lose a really key player. So I understand what his point is. I totally respect where he's coming from, but it's not going to move me off of my spot where I really only need to see Josh Allen get maybe 2 or 3 drives this entire preseason. And, maybe that's like 2 drives against Pittsburgh and 1 drive against the Bears, whatever. I predict they will do what they did last year, which is he'll play about 1/2 of one of these games, probably the Bears game coming up. And then maybe they'll play like a drive or 2 against the Steelers after that. And then they'll, t-shirts and hats game 3.
Yeah. I don't, McDermott and Bean have had this organization running in a certain way that has not changed, even as quarterback has changed, because technically McDermott came in, and we all know Tyrod Taylor was the starting quarterback at that time. Like, it doesn't matter who's been there. It's been the same kind of process or same kind of motivations or same expectations on what they've, wanted out of preseason going into the regular season. It has not changed regardless of who it is under center, who they have at their disposal, whatever it is. I think they've operated under McDermott's done the same thing all those years. So why would it change? I think they definitely, McDermott feels like a guy that's, kind of a, what am I thinking of here? Like he loves habit. He loves consistency. He loves no change whatsoever. And I think that's going to stay, even with a lot of turnover in the receiving group, as we've talked about, and so on and so forth. It's nothing will change. And to the point of this comment that we brought up earlier, it's like, yeah, when it's your time, it's your time. So, if an injury is coming in set number of snaps, kind of the counter argument is, then why the hell are you using up some of those counts in a meaningless game?
Yeah.
Like, if it's your time, it's your time. You don't ever want to see someone hurt. So don't take this out of context here, but I would rather see someone hurt in a meaningful game than a meaningless one. Like that's the nature of it. Like, no, they should be out there. And by the way, there is another thought to it where it's in a preseason game. Yes, you want to get up to game speed. You got to kind of bang the pads together a little bit to feel it out and stuff. Sure. But you're not going at 100%. Everyone on that field understands the situation of it, I would imagine. Now, when you're in the 2s and 3s and those guys are fighting for roster spots, not even for necessarily just the team they're playing for and representing, but maybe anyone else around the league, those guys are going a little harder than the rest. but your starters are not going to be going 100%. And there's even something to be said when it comes to, if you're not giving it your all, potentially you could put yourself into a problematic situation, whether it's health wise or, just whatever it might be, that it's just, why bother even in the first place? So I can understand where that kind of thought process comes from, but overall, I don't agree with it whatsoever. And realistically, the preseason is meaningless football, and you don't take your crown jewel and just dangle it out there for something potentially to even remotely happen. So I don't agree with that. Just let it happen. Be very simple, even when you do let it happen, and go on make sure you are healthy week 1 when the games start mattering. That's it.
And everybody needs to keep in mind too, the Bills only have 3 preseason games, but they are doing scrimmages with the Steelers the week before that game. And sometimes those can be more valuable than games because you can script sessions instead of just playing whatever the game hands you. And you can also protect your quarterbacks, and you can decide if you want to have live tackling or not, and a much more protected environment. That also makes me think maybe Josh Allen shouldn't play too much in the Steelers game. Like, do you really want him out there running plays after the Steelers have seen all your plays in a basic sort of way all week? One more comment on this before we get on to the next topic. A lot of concern in the feedback we got from folks on how slow the Bills were perceived to have started last year. Our friends at Air Raid chimed in. They'd go one half, one quarter, and into the third quarter. That's like the 3 games. Tons of new weapons and a slow start on opening night last year. Let's get Josh Allen ramped up. And then along those lines, Buffalo Sports Chatter, honestly, with the way he started last year against New York, I consider a full half of the Pittsburgh preseason game. Josh Allen was atrocious against the Jets on that opening Monday night. I'm not denying that. I don't come away from that game feeling like it was rust. I come away from that game feeling like he was trying to do way too much considering what the football gods had handed the Bills 4 plays into that game. Like, Josh Allen could have handed the ball off all night and the Bills would have won that game. And he was on national TV. I think we all feel good about saying Aaron Rodgers is one of his idols in the sport. We're not talking about beliefs. We're talking about in the sport. And I think he was ramped up to play against Aaron Rodgers' first game. And that doesn't just, you've been looking forward to it all offseason. It doesn't just shut off because Aaron Rodgers goes out. And I think Josh Allen was kind of out there to make a statement that game. And the statement, unfortunately, was, holy cow, even when everything's going wrong for the other team, the opposing quarterback can still lose the game for them if he allows himself to. And that's what happened. I don't look at that as rust because the Bills came back the next 2 weeks and just blew the doors off of the Raiders and the Commanders before blowing the doors off of the Dolphins, scoring 50 plus points, who had just scored 70 against the Broncos. So that's my thought on it. I don't necessarily live in that fear. Did you have a different read on that?
No, spot on. I talked about how when we were talking about defenses around the division, the Jets have the best defense in the division and have historically given Allen fits. So when you have all training camp, all preseason to game plan for that particular game, a defense that already seems to have that half leg up on you, then had all that prep time to really get things in line, to know what they needed to do to attack him and maybe even force him into thinking he needed to do stuff like that. I'm not saying the Jets were playing mind tricks on him, but overall, they clearly were confusing him. They were clearly just a leg up on him the entire game, because after that, why I come away that same way is exactly how you said it. They then followed that up with 3 beautiful games. The only time that season last year where everything seemed to be clicking well. The offense was great. I don't even think the offense was particularly fantastic in the Washington game.
Right.
But overall, they, as a team, they blew the doors off of them, and it was a complete dominant affair. And the Raiders, the Washington game, and then the Miami game, probably the best overall performance by the Bills last season. Those came immediately after that New York game. And I just don't see how that's a rust situation now that we do have kind of the benefit of hindsight, right? It's you look back at it and you reflect on it, and it's like, that wasn't rust. That wasn't, he needed to get more preseason action. That was quite literally, I'm with you. I believe it to be more so adrenaline ridden, national television. You just watched football Sunday happen the day before. You've been amped up for this game. It doesn't matter realistically what happened to Rodgers to open up that game. you're just ready to go to show the stage that you are ready to go. And it wasn't working out because you were playing a phenomenal defense that was prepped and ready to go against you. And realistically, that's just what happened. I don't know if it could have been as simple as handing the ball off the entire game to win.
Yeah, a
I
little
think the Jets are,
hyperbole there.
yeah, a little bit of tongue in cheek, but overall, yeah, it's definitely something where rust was not what went into that. I think it was something greater than that. And not to disrespect those Cardinals, but they don't have the New York Jets on defense, and that defense is definitely in a rebuild right now where I'm not exactly fearful of it for Josh Allen and company. I think it's kind of a nice matchup for them. It's a game where if you wanted to compare apples to apples in week 1 to week 1, the Cardinals game is probably going to feel like a breeze compared to the Jets defense overall. It's probably going to make some great television because I can probably see both offenses maybe having their days week 1, not to get too far ahead here, Josh, but overall, I'm not too fearful that Allen's going to have fits to deal with when it comes. Well, not literally fits, but he's not going to have issues dealing with the Cardinals defense come week 1.
Maybe Fitzgerald Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr. All right. Well, that I think that was a good conversation. You know, I sound biased. It's our podcast. I think it was a good conversation, but I think it's always worthwhile to kind of see, you know, what we're thinking. I definitely appreciate all the folks that responded. We don't have enough time to get to everybody because we have got quite a bit to get to. Luka, last year against the Jets, the two starting safeties for the Bills were Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Little did we know at the time that would be the last opening game that those two would start together. This year, the safeties, assuming health, one is going to be Taylor Rapp. The other one feels really up in the air right now. This past week, Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards were both held out of practice after Cole Bishop sustained a shoulder injury and Mike Edwards sustained a hamstring injury as recently as Sunday morning. You're listening to this on Monday, so yesterday, Sean McDermott confirmed they are still both week to week. So if you're hoping that he would change his tone and say now Cole Bishop is more day to day, that did not happen today. So what does that mean? That means the three-man safety battle for opposite Taylor Rapp is now down to one, and it's Damar Hamlin. What the Bills have done since this happened is they have signed two safeties. They signed 36-year-old Kareem Jackson, former first-round pick of the Houston Texans. He has been a starter the majority of his career, started off as a corner, but now he's been a pretty decent safety in the league. They also signed Terrell Burgess, former third-round pick of the LA Rams as recently as 2020, so he's not an old guy by any means, but much more of a four-phase special teamer and never really developed into that starting safety that teams were hoping for. But additionally, and we were kind of ahead on this, the Bills switched Cam Lewis to safety. And that makes sense. Cam Lewis is kind of a jack of all trades. He can play corner. He can play nickel. He can play safety. He's one of your better special teams players. We all understand he should have knocked the ball down against Justin Jefferson. We all understand he shouldn't have run into the punter against the Dolphins. He's had a couple bad plays, but Cam Lewis is a very valuable football player. I like that move because, Luka, I think that the Bills were in a dangerous spot if these live games happened. And I don't want to say this with any kind of insensitivity, but it's a conversation we have to have. If these live games happen and now the player that they have all the eggs in his basket, Damar Hamlin, looks hesitant or isn't as confident now that it's live hitting, you would totally understand that after what he's gone through. If for whatever reason the games start and in a similar manner to last year's linebacker conversation in the preseason, if Damar Hamlin looks as bad as preseason Tyrel Dodson and preseason AJ Klein did last year, where the Bills were like, you know what, Terrell Bernard, you've been out all preseason with an injury. You're the guy because you're door number 3 at this point. So I think Cam Lewis makes sense as a fallback plan along with Kareem Jackson and Terrell Burgess. Where do you see the safety position right now? And do you feel confident that it's going to be Damar Hamlin's job to lose, or do you think it's still going to be a competition between Damar Hamlin and whoever?
It's kind of right in the middle of those two things. I don't believe it's just Damar Hamlin's, to lose. Here you go, Damar. It's your spot now because it was between you, Cole, and Mike. But also at the same time, there's a clear divide between Damar and the rest. Even with Cam Lewis understanding the defense, been around all of that stuff, jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife, whatever you want to call him. he's that for a reason, right? You didn't want to just stick him as the backup safety for a specific reason. You didn't want to just absolutely lock him in as your backup nickelback for a specific reason. It's just he can facilitate all of those items for you in a decent capacity. He is the game day backup for all of those things. He's not, intended starter. So realistically, I believe it's DeMar's kind of to lose. But overall, I think it's one of those things where I think there's part of the coaching staff, there's part of McDermott that is hoping Cole Bishop and or Mike Edwards' injuries are not as bad as it needs to be. They're being more cautious with them in their week to week. And realistically, if they come to the third preseason game, I think they're done for the preseason. Like they wouldn't play games. Once you get the week to week at this point, I feel like there's no reason to play you. But overall, that doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't be 100% by week one. They just are being cautious about it. They're evaluate it and stuff like that. And maybe we see a situation where Damar Hamlin is getting that kind of starter treatment on preseason games. But then week one, it's Mike Edwards lined up back there or Cole Bishop lined up back there. I don't think that's out of the question by any stretch of the imagination. I can absolutely foresee something like that happening. So that's why I kind of don't believe it's DeMar's to lose at this point. I think there is still that real possibility that one of those other two could still be looked at in line for that. And then maybe the value in this preseason is DeMar is going to get that starter treatment. He's going to get a look, but in a limited capacity. He can get his feet wet. He can kind of bang around the pads a little bit, similar to like he did last preseason, but then realistically be forecasted and looking at like the emergency starter come week one, because the team has kind of already gotten to the point where they're like, hey, Mike Edwards is our starter in-house. The people don't know that yet, and we're just hoping he's 100% by week one.
I could see that. I got some pushback on Twitter when I said that I felt like Cole Bishop was going to miss the rest of camp. Just for those that don't know, like the Bills have four practices left. Camp is not nearly as long as I think we all think it is. And like Lucas said, it's hard to imagine him playing in any preseason games. And at this point, even if he does, it would be in game 3 where he probably wouldn't even be playing with any starters anyway. And the pushback I got on Twitter was, well, remember when Terrell Bernard went away and came back and was still the starter? And that's a fair point. But I think the difference is Terrell Bernard, despite not playing much his rookie year, one atrocious game against the Jets, was in the building all year, learning the system, all the stuff that comes along with being an NFL player, NFL weight room, all that stuff. And I think there was more of a comfortability there. I can't see Sean McDermott against Kyler Murray throwing a rookie second round pick out there as his starter, who's had either one preseason game with other backups, no training camp outside of the first couple days, and saying, go get him, kid. I really can't. That's where I think Mike Edwards, despite not being a Bill last year, to your point, Luca, more realistic in that scenario, where if it's going to be like, hey, we got to throw a veteran in there, it would be Edwards, just because, he's a pro's pro. He's not going to, he's the way Mike Edwards is talked about by the scouting world is he's not going to kill you. You're going to feel good about him being out there. He's not going to win a game for you, but he's not going to lose a game for you. I also think Cam Lewis is very live in this battle, but I would be very stunned at this point, which is unfortunate because I think he was off to a good start if Cole Bishop factors into that starting situation early in the year. Some other downstream effects of that, Luca, your guy, Daquan Hardy, the Bills' day 3 pick, who you have said, pie in the sky could be our next Terrence McGee, like a great kick returner who also plays cornerback, has been getting some time at nickelback. And with Cam Lewis moving to safety, that opens up the direct backup to Taron Johnson as a rosterable spot, which is going to benefit, I think, Jamarcus Ingram, who slides right into there. He's going to make the team. He can also play boundary cornerback. Daquan Hardy's been playing there. He's also been playing outside while factoring into the punt return competition. I think right now, the injuries to Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards and the subsequential move of subsequential feels like I just made up a word. The following move of Cam Lewis to safety has basically, I don't want to say locked, but really enhanced the roster chances of Jamarcus Ingram and Daquan Hardy, just because of what their projected roles are now going forward.
It's a very good conversation, and it's a very intriguing one to watch as we go through the preseason entirely. It's funny though, because you even have it in our notes, tied for backup nickel back with Jamarcus Ingram is Daquan Hardy, or Daquan Hardy, however you say it. And it's like, so Jamarcus Ingram is the Taron Johnson backup, and Daquan Hardy is just Daquan Hardy. Like,
Right.
he's not Taron Johnson's backup. I'll tell you that. If he's going in there to fill a role that Taron Johnson is not out there on the field for, it's not to be the same guy, because the only thing that would be similar would then be the third corner on the field. That's it. There is nothing similar to those two players as a physical being as well as play style. They are polar opposites, it feels like. So I don't necessarily say that's a bad thing, because I would say Daquan Hardy is more of your traditional slot corner, right? He's just your small, a little undersized. Well, he's definitely undersized, but undersized, shifty, fast, straight line speed, all that kind of stuff. Pretty typical. Whereas Taron Johnson's actually kind of been that not prototypical nickel corner that has been able to allow this defense to excel because of that, where he's a bigger guy. He can get in there and bang it around, stuff like that, but still be a decent coverage corner as well on top of it, right? He doesn't have that overwhelming speed, of course, but that's okay, because of that's not what you're asking him to do in a McDermott defense, in a Bills defense overall. So if the avenue for him to make the game day roster, though, is there, that's exciting, because where he should excel is, what would suck is, I kind of broke there. What would suck is if he wasn't able to crack the 53 because of, or I shouldn't even say 53. I mean game day rosters. If he's not able to crack the game day roster just because he feels a little bit more of a luxury, and you had someone else that's like, okay, we can have Khalil Shakir take punts, we can have so-and-so do this, although I don't believe I don't think they want Shakir taking punts moving forward, for what it's worth. But if that was the case, and then he just can't get out there, now this is that excuse that gets that there, because as we've talked about, Cam Lewis now is being looked at as a primary backup, potentially as a safety. So that opens up that kind of universal spot there that could be Hardy, who then he's your primary returner. He's your fourth corner on the game day roster. He's everything you want him to be in that spot, right? Like, if you need that utility DB / returner, he is that guy, and he feels like he fits that mold. And then you brought it up offline, so I want to give you that credit for it. It's fun to see him getting thrown in there now. When I learned of it first, it's fantastic. It brings a smile to my face. They're not even just throwing him in at nickel on the dime and stuff. Well, funny enough, but they're also doing it on boundary. They're just throwing him into the fire. Just say, hey, try this for a play, try this for 2 plays, stuff like that. Because on game days, that would be his job. If anything were to come up, that's exactly the scenario of what would have to happen. You're realistically just sitting there waiting for an exchange of, ball of possession and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter. So you're just waiting for the punt or the kick, whatever it is. And all of a sudden injury happens. It's up to you now, kid. Get in there. You're playing corner 2 opposite of, whoever, Benford, and you're lined up against Michael Wilson Sr. for the Cardinals. Like, welcome to the NFL.
Right.
It's one of those things where I think that's very exciting for a player. For him, I imagine he's very excited for the opportunity that has presented itself. But I think even as us sitting here, as someone that is a little bit of a fan of a corner of his style and skill set, I like that there is a potential avenue for him to make game day rosters and maybe make an impact on this team moving forward.
If he wins the punt return job, he'll be active on game day. And I think that's the larger point is there's 2 kinds of backups. There's a get you out of the game backup, like an injury happened in the game. We have to get through 2 more quarters without this player. And there's we're down a player for the next 3 weeks. Who's going to take that role? Daquan Hardy, to me, is the get you out of the game backup at nickel corner. I don't think Jamarcus Ingram will be active on game day, because when you start looking at defensive backs, assuming everybody's healthy, you'll have Benford, Douglas, and Elam up, and then you'll have Taron Johnson. And I don't think you'll have room for Ingram, because then you have to have a few safeties active. I think Cam Lewis will be active. Now, if he wins a starting job, it gets a little more confusing. I would think Cam Lewis is basically your first off the bench at backup safety and nickel if something happens in game. But still, Daquan Hardy's one injury away from having to get you out of a game at nickel. And then going forward, if, say, Taron Johnson, knock on wood, misses a month, that first game he gets hurt in, it's all hands on deck. Daquan Hardy, Cam Lewis, get me out of the game. If it's Daquan Hardy, you probably see Dorian Williams come in on more like shorter down and distances because he's not, like Lucas said, he's not Taron Johnson in the running game. But then like the next week, that's when Jamarcus Ingram will be up. You're a starter now. You're the new Taron Johnson. And, we'll see how it goes. But no, that it's a very important distinction. And Daquan Hardy has to be able to get you out of a game. And that's why the Bills have been basically playing peekaboo with him in practice. It's like third down, he's just sitting there. It's like, hey, you're in. You got to be ready. And they've been doing that also with Alec Anderson some, and they did it with Ryan Vandemark. I love it because the life of a backup is not, hey, we're going to prep you for this game and you're good to go. You know you're going in 7 plays. The life of a backup is you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're one of the most important players on the team. And that's what they need to prepare for. Speaking of guys who might be really important to this team, Von Miller and Kaiir Elam, Luka, are having, I think, by most people's accounts, very productive training camps. Von Miller, the first day pads were on, really took it to Spencer Brown. He also had some juice at the I don't want to say the blue and red scrimmage. It was Sunday. It was today, Sunday that we're recording. He didn't really do much at the blue and red scrimmage. Von Miller had multiple people saying vintage Von Miller. Dion Dawkins said Von Miller is back. And, I don't necessarily think we're going to get back to what we saw in 2022, where he was getting like a sack a game with the Bills until he got hurt in Detroit. But both of these guys, to varying degrees, are guys that the fan base at large, you never have a universal and 100% opinion, but the fan base at large had somewhat given up on. And for Von Miller, it's age, it's too many injuries, it's, oh my God, you're so overpaid, which is really unfair when you think about like what happened injury-wise and how long we took to evaluate him coming off of that injury. And then Kaiir Elam is the first-round pick that the Bills traded up for in a draft that's already produced one of the best cornerbacks in the sport that the Chiefs got ahead of the Bills. And, there's some cornerbacks behind him, like Tariq Woolen, who have been fantastic. A little lesser last year. It's not the point, but Kaiir Elam's really had a hard time just getting on the field and, losing snaps, being inactive for someone like Xavier Rhodes, who was brought in off the street like a week before. Now Dane Jackson is gone. Kaiir Elam's trying to win that backup boundary job. And Luka, every single day, it feels like you're hearing about Kaiir Elam making plays against the ones, intercepting Josh Allen multiple times in these camps, having an interception against Josh Allen in the blue and red scrimmage, to the point now that the people who are really clued into this team, the beat reporters that you really go to for information, not speculation, are thinking it's not just about Kaiir Elam making this team. It's not just about Kaiir Elam being active on game day. Are we inching toward a world where Kaiir Elam actually rotates in for Benford for a drive or for Douglas for a drive just to keep him ramped up when the games actually count, like against the Cardinals, against the Dolphins? I don't want to just say, take everything I just said and go, Luka, because I talked about Von Miller and Kaiir Elam. I'm going to phrase it this way. Which one of these guys are you personally most intrigued by?
I think the answer is Von, only because his path to playing is exactly where it was. Mm-hmm. It's still very prevalent. And I think this team desperately still needs that closer of a pass rusher. And the hope is, like you said, we don't necessarily need, we do need, it would be incredible to get back to a sack per game pace, but it's not an expectation or realistic one to be there for Von. But there's going to come a handful of games this season, and then of course during the playoffs, where you need that closeout edge presence to get to the quarterback, to force whatever mistake or force the sack to happen, if it is that, and close out games. And the path to play is there for Von. Whereas with Kaiir, it's not as clear. It's, as you brought it up, all of a sudden it's being suggested now, will he find himself in a rotation with Benford and Douglas And my answer to that is that's not something that the Bills have really done since going back to Kyer's rookie year, where they were just like, okay, Christian Benford, one series, Kyer Elam, one series, back to Benford, another series, like so on and so forth, just because they were playing out who's going to win this thing. And then, long story short, of course, Christian Benford won it. So it's just, I don't see how all of a sudden McDermott's just, I don't see how you can keep someone as hot as the way it sounds like he is right now off the field. But I don't see how, as we talked about with preseason, availability and snap count and all that, how McDermott's going to all of a sudden magically change his ways and be like, okay, we're going to now go into rotation. And then how do you tell Rasul Douglas, hey, you're going to have to sit down this drive, even though you've been outstanding for us, because we need to make sure Kyer gets his drive. Like, Rasul's not going to want to hear that. And I don't think Benford's going to want to hear that, because that is just a little inkling that your job's not as secure as it felt. And you think you're better than them because realistically, you probably deserve to feel that way since you had a very successful go last season, when you were on a field in competitive games. So I'm excited to hear about Kyer not being, let's call it a waste, or a missed first round pick. It's extremely exciting. And I love the positive things that are coming out about Kyer Elam. That makes me happy that there is something there, and maybe that switch is flipping in front of us. That's fantastic. But currently where it stands, that I just don't see how McDermott should ultimately change things too much with those corners, because right now with this defense, Josh, those boundary corners and the linebacker situation are probably your most secure, safe spots on that defense, all things considered. I mean, D-line is safe in the sense of exactly who it is and what you're getting out of it. But I'm not saying it's safe in like I expect great things out of it. Whereas Terrell Bernard, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, all of those guys I know are going to go out week in, week out, as long as they're healthy, and provide you excellent play. And I don't, and obviously when it comes to Benford and Rasul Douglas, how are you getting Elam into that equation? I think Elam will absolutely see the field. He'll be active on game days and he'll see the field based on certain packages you're putting out there and stuff. Like, there will be moments that he's needed, but overall, unless it's an injury, I don't forecast how he gets regular game time. So going to your question, it's like I'm more excited or interested in Von because the path to playing is quite simple. It's what it always has been with a McDermott Bills. It's in the rotation, and he's kind of looked at as that 1A pass rush specialist on this team. It's him and Epinesa right now. So realistically, if he's progressing at a great level, that's fantastic. Because if we can get 80% of 2022 Von Miller pre-injury, that is a hell of a lot. That's 10,000 times better than any edge rusher we had last season outside of Epinesa week 5 in London. That's basically what it comes down to. So I'm definitely leaning towards Von to answer your question.
I'm with you. The path there to impact a team in a greater way is there for Von, because even if Kyer Elam becomes a starting caliber cornerback, he's not better than what they already have. And rotating a cornerback doesn't present you the same advantages that rotating defensive linemen does. So from that standpoint, it's clearly Von. I do think maybe the sweet spot for Von is you're just like a nickel dime. Well, they're nickel defense all the time, but like a third down pass rush specialist. Like if it's a short yardage situation, let's let Epinesa go out there and do the dirty work. And let's let Von just rush the passer. He's excellent at it, and maybe he's earned that in his career. As far as Kyer Elam goes, and you mentioned Benford, it's funny because the one way he can get on the field is Benford has been a guy that's missed some games. He's missed, let me look it up here. He's missed 7 games or 8 games or 7 games in 2022. And then he missed 2 regular season games and at least 1 playoff game in 2023. I don't remember if he missed the Chiefs game or not. But it's almost like Benford went from day 3 pick to like, whoa, who's this guy? To like now he's graduated to the point that he is just excellent and we don't even talk about it anymore. Because by all accounts at camp, he's been locked down. Nobody's getting open on him. The only time you ever see him giving up catches is when it's like Keon Coleman, with great coverage by Benford, manages to pull a ball away in traffic. And it's like, okay, I can live with that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're gonna,
This guy made a spectacular play over him.
right.
Okay.
So he's not Antonio Cromartie at the catch point.
Darn.
Got it. Okay. But he's there. Like, he doesn't get beat. He's so technically sound. And people at camp are just saying that he is their best cornerback. And that includes Rasul Douglas, who's been excellent for this team. You know, Rasul Douglas has gotten beat a couple times by these guys, but Benford is just, I think there's a realistic possibility that by the end of this season, Christian Benford is viewed as maybe the best player on this defense. He doesn't say a lot.
Ooh.
He's not overly flashy. A lot has to go into that because Matt Milano is pretty damn good. Taron Johnson is pretty damn good, but Christian Benford, no offense to either one of those guys, plays a more important position. And if he's great at his position, that's going to mean more than even Taron Johnson and to a lesser extent Matt Milano, because as much as we like Matt Milano, linebackers are linebackers. If they're not rushing the passer, for the most part, there's a cap to how much impact a coverage linebacker is going to have on a team. So I have no interest in taking Christian Benford off the field just to keep Kaiir Elam lathered up. If you want to take Rasul Douglas off here and there just because he's 29 years old and you want to keep him fresh and that's where I would do it. But I also think, realistically speaking, it's a 17-game season. Elam will play. And the Bills had the luxury the last couple of years of having Dane Jackson ready to go, a starting level cornerback to come off the bench. Hopefully they have that again this year in Elam, because if that's the case, the true value Luka comes in 2025 when Rasul Douglas is a free agent, and then you have Benford and Elam on the outside, and perfect. And, people I've already seen that. Can the Bills afford 2 high-paid young cornerbacks? Like, folks, let's get there when we get there. See if you could start first. I love it, man. I love the optimism. Training camp.
How is Kaiir Elam under the umbrella of hype? No, it's like, if you get in a situation where you want to still pay Rasul Douglas, right? You want to keep him there, and you're going to have to pay him a decent amount probably to still do so. And then Christian Benford, being younger, he's going to obviously draw a lot of money in his own right if he continues to project the way it is. If he becomes the best player or most impactful player on the Bills defense, we'll call it. I think best is a wild one, because let's say Von does get to 85% 2022. I think that's where you go, okay, well, that probably is still your best player on defense. Or Matt Milano, as you were highlighting. Terrell Bernard, let's not forget him. He had a pretty good year last year as well. It's one of those things where it's, if he is playing at that level, yes, you're going to have to pay him. But I like Kaiir Elam's almost like working out too well if he is playing as well as he is. It's like it took a couple years to progress. You found this absolute diamond in the rough later on in that draft that was able to patch over everything. And then he's going to come up. He's going to not cost you an arm and a leg at that point in time, even though he was a first round pick. You have the 5th year option in your holster if you realistically want to, but there's a realistic chance based on his limited game time that you don't have to pay him that 5th year option. And you could actually maybe work out, let's call it a bridge deal, a 3-year deal, manageable dollar amount that puts you in a great spot. He can feel good that he has a little bit more security, and you can feel good that you're basically locking up that other side boundary, that the leverage is on you more so than it's on Rasul when it comes to keeping him along. It's the corner situation for the Bills. I can't recall one that has worked out in such a most random way possible with a position group. Mm-hmm. If Kaiir's working out the way it sounds, like that's the most important figure here, and Christian Benford, of course, continues to be what he is. I mean, this has worked out in spades. This is incredible. And as you pointed out, it's one of the most important positions on the field every game. A boundary corner is a helpless position where you need your most supreme athletes, your most depended athletes on the field from a defensive perspective on every single snap. And if you found yourself in I bet you there has to be at least, just without any knowledge to this, there has to be at least 18 to 20 teams minimum that wish they were in the position at boundary corner that the Bills are currently, not only just for this year, but for projected years to come. because they really have tripped themselves up on a fantastic situation, both for the cap, for the future, and where they currently sit now. So it's a pretty interesting situation, to say the least.
Can't believe you're a Christian Benford hater. No, Luke has been right on Christian Benford since the get-go. But I think it's a great situation. You never hear a coach say we have too many good cover guys. The conversation at the end of the year could be tricky. It's, do you pick up his 5th year option or not? Because you have to make that decision after year 3.
Yeah.
And maybe Elam will play just enough games that it makes it a tricky decision. But I mean, that's a problem that everybody would sign up for. Like, sign me up today to have this conversation next February, hopefully after a parade, where I'm like, man, that Elam 5th year option decision, that's a tricky one because he hasn't played all 3 years, but boy, he was good last year and was very important on that championship team. All right. Well, Luka, this Bills defense we just talked about had 0, and I say 0 players on the NFL's top 100 list. In fact, this Buffalo Bills team overall had only 2 players on the NFL's top 100 team. Although I still feel like the Bills should get credit for Jordan Poyer because it's based off of last year, but whatever.
I was going to say Poyer, Diggs, those individuals. I don't know who else made it that would no longer be with us, if
I
for
think
whatever.
that's it.
I would imagine that's it. But, it's like, yeah, they should get credit for those guys. It feels like, but whatever.
Yeah, Morrison White didn't make it. Leonard Floyd didn't make. I don't think he would have. Anyway, look at these lists. And this is also the same week that the Madden ratings came out. And, Josh Allen was the 4th highest quarterback in Madden, 93 overall, but he was behind Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and then Patrick Mahomes. And then Josh Allen was the 3rd highest quarterback on the NFL top 100 list, but he was the 12th overall player in the league. And that, of course, got people to say, there's not 12 players in the league you take over Josh Allen, which I think, I don't even mean to do that voice like that because it makes it sound like I'm making those people sound dumb. They're right. There's not 11 players in the league you would take over Josh Allen. I do think in some respect with these lists, you can't weigh positional value because at that point in time, you would take, Christian McCaffrey. You wouldn't even take Christian McCaffrey over like a healthy Kirk Cousins because
Right.
or a Brock Purdy. That's a perfect example. Who's a better football player, Brock Purdy or Christian McCaffrey? McCaffrey. Who's more important to the Niners' success this year? Brock Purdy. So it's the whole difference between positional value. So I understand that side of it. In general, Luka, and the NFL Top 100 came off the rails the last night when it was announced that Patrick Mahomes was the 4th highest rated player in the sport. I can't even say that without laughing. And he wasn't even the highest quarterback. Yeah. Lamar Jackson was 2, but also number 1 quarterback. And then Tyreek Hill was 1. In general, how much stock do you put into these lists, including the Madden ratings, NFL Top 100, or do you more so just look at these as what I think they are, which are fun conversation starters?
Well, definitely the latter if you're giving me only those 2 options.
Well, whatever. Take it any way you want.
No. These lists, to me, the NFL Top 100 more so, but even if you want to sprinkle in the Madden rating stuff, you're giving individuals an opinionated situation to then make a judgment of players on their own kind of understanding of them. We can't guarantee that. So the NFL Top 100 is voted on by the players, of course. And it's like, who knows how much of so-and-so they've watched comparative to these individuals. As you said, it's not a positional rankings in the sense of, where you can take positional value in this. It's not a strict journalistic list as well. You see those come out from publications like ESPN and stuff, which then hilariously you got people like McAfee and stuff shredding as well. So overall, just these lists, they are conversation starters, but also they're just, I don't mean it as negative as it sounds, especially, but they are popularity lists. That's what they are. Especially with the NFL Top 100, Tyreek Hill being number 1 is a clear-cut sign that it's like all the NFL players that voted on this and everything like that, they put Tyreek number 1 because that's who they wanted to turn on games to watch the most, because Tyreek is very fun to watch. Yes, he's a Miami Dolphin. I get it. he is very fun to watch. There is, at any moment in time, he could pop off something that is so spectacular and everything of such. He is absolutely justified in the contract extension he just got. And clearly in the NFL circles, people love watching him. They voted him number one because of Lamar Jackson kind of fills that spot as well. I don't think people don't like watching Patrick Mahomes, and also find it ridiculous that Patrick Mahomes was not number one first, but then also the number one rated quarterback. But realistically, what happened was people looked at these lists, and we've heard stories on when players are presented these, how they vote on them, what they can and cannot vote, what's turned in, so on and so forth. But realistically, what's happened is clearly as the ballots were received and, they just hashed it all out, people just enjoyed watching Lamar apparently last year a little bit more through another MVP year. And it just got him through the stacking of all these ballots higher than Mahomes. This is not that NFL players are sitting there saying, I fear Lamar Jackson more so than I fear Patty Mahomes. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure 7 to 9, if not 10 out of 10 people, if you lined them up in NFL circles, would say, I am much more fearful of Patrick Mahomes. That 3-time Super Bowl champ, a guy going for a three-peat right now. They are much more fearful of 15 in red than they are of Lamar Jackson. Like, I don't think that's not a hot, topic. That's nothing. Like, that's how it is. But this NFL 100 list is just quite literally NFL players voting for players they like, and then it just adds up to wherever it is. I don't think there's anything more in it. And probably how it's presented too is, and this is just my opinion, to keep the rating or rankings kind of from going off the rails year after year. They probably show you what they were ranked last season, and then you just readjust them however you feel fit. That's what I feel. Because Josh Allen going down to 12, I believe he was higher previously. It's not like he moved drastically down. That would be a totally different conversation. And then with the Madden ratings, he just moved down a little bit, but realistically, everyone knows it's not like Josh Allen got any worse. Just some idiot just decided that they wanted to rate him a little bit differently now, and they wanted to put him where there is. Like, that's just the nature of the beast, and it holds zero brain capacity of mine when it comes to caring at all on how to judge and evaluate players. I don't care. I couldn't care less about all of these stupid lists. I have my opinions, just like these people have their opinions on where these players stack up, and that is okay. That's okay with me, and I'm assuming it's okay with them because they're willing to publicize it as well. And that's the reality of it. And I just move on with my life like nothing's changed.
I will say one thing about the Madden ratings. It is kind of funny. You and I, for those that don't know, you and I in our history have been pretty serious Madden players, not anymore, but there was a point in our lives where we were, and we always focus on the overall rating. Like Josh Allen is a 93. Luca and I, and anybody that plays Madden will tell you that the overall rating might be the least important rating in the actual game. Like, for a quarterback, what's his speed? What's his throw power? And does he have certain abilities? For a running back, what is his speed? What's his juke move? What's his spin move? And, for the longest time in Madden, Tom Brady was one of the highest rated quarterbacks, and everybody would rather have like a rookie Lamar Jackson who wasn't even fully developed yet, or the mobile quarterback. So I always, I post it from our account because it's good content, but it's just funny, like, from the mind of a Madden player, I could never tell you what somebody's overall was, but I could always tell you who the 99 speed guys were, or who the best route running guys were, the best spec catch guys were. That part's funny to me. Top 100, you bring up an interesting point. And I want to take it one step further. You mentioned the guys they like watching. I wonder how much of it is players, maybe the non-quarterbacks, a little bit of begrudging the quarterbacks. Like, you guys always get all the credit. You guys always get all the money. You're the ones that are making the NBA money in our league. The rest of us are making the non-NBA money. Like, when you compare like what an average NBA player makes to average NFL player. And, quarterbacks are kind of like treated as like part of the up front office, where like everybody else is just kind of there. And that's why one reason why Josh Allen is so popular is because he's one of the guys. I could see where a bunch of guys like that would be like, it's kind of like if the person that's popular at school that wins all the awards, prom king comes around senior year and you're like, I don't dislike this guy, but I'm just sick of seeing him win stuff. I'm going to vote for somebody else. So I get that. And then, excuse me, the other thing I would say, Tyreek Hill would not have been my choice for number one. It would have been Mahomes. And Tyreek Hill would not even be my choice for number one receiver. It would be Jefferson. Hill would be two. I get Tyreek Hill, though. He is an absolute unicorn. He is, in my memory, the best speed receiver I can remember because he is as fast and dynamic as Steve Smith was. Tyreek Hill's faster. Oh, yeah. But he runs crisp routes. Every time he touches the ball, he is a threat to score. He's Odell Beckham in his prime with a speed burst button, which is just scary. And whenever the Bills play the Dolphins, if you could tell me any given week, like, hey, you need to you could pick one player on the other team to like miss the team bus and not make the game, I'd pick the quarterback almost without fail every single week. It'd be Tyreek Hill for the Dolphins. That's how important he is. And that's not a knock on Tua. I'm probably higher on Tua than most Bills fans pretend to be. But so that one didn't bother me. Christian McCaffrey and Lamar Jackson over Patrick Mahomes felt kind of forced. I'll say this about Lamar Jackson, and I'll also group Josh Allen and Joe Burrow into this. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson are all excellent quarterbacks, and the Ravens, Bengals, and Bills fans should be elated that they're their quarterbacks. And anytime a conversation comes up between Bills fans and Ravens fans on Twitter, or Ravens fans and Bengals fans on Twitter with the mudslinging about who has the better quarterback, it's the ultimate eye roll to me, because we're all lucky, and there are about 25 other teams that would sell half their franchise to get what we have. But anytime you rank any one of these three guys over Mahomes, it opens up a conversation about any one of these guys that's unfair to those guys. Because the only knock you can really have on Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen, and there's things in all their games you can knock, but the only true knock you can have on those guys and their greatness is they're not as good as Mahomes. And how much of a knock is that? I think Mahomes is going to retire and he's going to be a Mount Rushmore quarterback. I really do. He might already be there. And I think by the time Mahomes retires, it's going to be a real conversation about Brady versus Mahomes. Mm-hmm. And I think to say Josh Allen's not Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson's not Patrick Mahomes, what is that really saying? But when you rank them ahead of Patrick Mahomes, whichever one of those three it is, or whoever you want to inject in the conversation, it opens up the grossest analysis. Then you get out of the woodwork the people that can't wait to just look at Lamar Jackson and say, he's a running back playing quarterback. He lost to Mahomes in the playoffs. Or Josh Allen has yet to beat Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game. And, let's not even look at the fact that he gave the Bills the lead twice after the 2-minute warning. And if not for Chris Jones making a game-saving play, pushing Deion Dawkins into his lap, Josh Allen would have thrown the touchdown pass to Khalil Shakir last year. Tyler Bass missing a kick. Joe Burrow, I don't really have their games memorized. I know the game they won at Arrowhead was not Joe Burrow's best day. Their defense played great. But still, all three teams in a great spot. And anytime that one of those guys gets bumped up by one of these lists over Mahomes, it just opens up a bunch of unfair criticism, Luka, and it starts conversations that I just hate to hear, where it's tearing down those quarterbacks who I think are all provably great. And it shouldn't be a negative that you're just not as great as maybe the greatest of all time.
Yeah, it's a simple conversation, and anyone that lives in any universe, any world that is different than Mahomes is the number one at that position and is the most important player in this league. And then the next tier are those. I think it's very safe to say it's those three guys. I don't know how it can be anything else. I don't know how.
Who else would it be?
I can't think of literally anyone, because everyone else you have those three guys where their question marks quite literally are, can they finally get past Kansas City? Although there is an asterisk on the Bengals because technically they've done it once. Mm-hmm. So realistically, it's just, can they do it again? But it's still a question in its own right. And as you said, how is that really a criticism? It's more so a detriment of the team and the organization than it is just the quarterback. But Mahomes has been, backpacking teams for years now. So it does kind of lean on the quarterback, of course. But after that is when the questions are no longer just simply how do they get past, X player or X team. The question marks are now, can Trevor Lawrence, finally win a game without historic means or without historic collapse on the opposite side? Can Tua finally win a playoff game? Because Tua, I think it's Chris Brockman on Rich Eisen show. He always loves to say Tua is the first player in NFL history to lose 2 playoff games in a single season, because he lost week 18 last year and then lost the playoff game, of course. I think that's always, it gets me giggling every time, because that's his criticism, somewhat justifiably so. It's like Tua can't win playoff games. He had a home playoff game that he lost, and then he lost the one on the road.
Real quick question for you, and
Yeah.
be as honest as you want. You know how wore down the Bills were in the DeMar Hamlin year when they beat the Skylar Thompson Dolphins.
Yeah.
In your heart of hearts, Tua plays that game. Who wins?
Dolphins.
Same.
Dolphins. Yeah. Dolphins win that game if Tua is in.
Same.
Yeah. The Bills were not great on that day.
No.
I mean, Skylar Thompson put up some serious yards and points that it was like,
yeah, and a lot of that was because plays that set them up for good field position. Thompson wasn't great, but like the fact that it was so close, the Bills turned the ball over a lot.
Yeah.
I felt like the Bills that entire playoff run were a team that was just begging to get beat because they looked like they were on E.
I mean, and
boy, did they.
Yeah, it all took place in front of us. But no, that next tier are those guys. And then, the people that just elevated themselves to what appears to be that tier when it comes to like the Jordan Loves, it's okay. What can they get to that next step now? So realistically, it is Mahomes. It is the next 3 being Allen, Burrow, and Lamar, who have clearly proven themselves as elite play callers who can absolutely backpack their teams to wins. And the only question is, can they get over the peak that is the Mahomes peak itself? And then after that tier 3 is the likes of your Trevor Lawrence, your Justin Herbert, your Jordan Love, as I grouped in there, so on and so forth. Like those Stafford. Stafford. Well, Stafford's, it's so funny. Stafford, I love to just pull outside tier rankings, because I genuinely, as a pure passer, I think Stafford's up there with everyone. And then he's won a Super Bowl. And it's just one of those things where I would have loved to have seen Stafford not get absolutely bled dry in Detroit for as many years as he did, because I think Stafford would be in a totally different conversation if he wasn't just stuck in Detroit. Like, I genuinely believe that, because it's one thing where you hear people time and time again, your Aaron Rodgers, I think Mahomes has said it, where Stafford's one of the first 3 passers of the ball that is always brought up. And it's clear as day why he was a number 1 overall pick, why he's been as good as he's been for as long as it's been. And they're continuing to go to him. And he actually has some sort of leverage on the Rams right now at his age, after winning a Super Bowl 2 years ago, to still get paid, to still be their starter for years to come. And they're not looking for a succession plan actively. Like, he's a he's the only one. Like, yes, he's probably in that tier 3 right now, but I don't put him in one. It's like he's off to the side. It's just, he is one of one. He's a little bit different. Like I saw someone out there once say, if Stafford can't do it again and stuff, like, he's really just going to turn into a Joe Flacco. I'm like, that is so unfair. Like, it's just a one-time winner that no one's going to remember. It's like, no. Stafford had been balling out for years and years and years. And he's just, unfortunately, it was alongside Megatron in that absolute cesspool that is Detroit. And that sucks for both of those Hall of Famers. Like, it's just like, sorry, man. Like, you're stuck in Detroit. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to go anywhere. That's just where you reside. So yeah, I just put him aside. But overall, back to the conversation we're having, it is ridiculous. So then when you see that banter on Twitter and stuff, where people either are trying to put down these quarterbacks, I have friends that do it, and I laugh at it because it is funny, just it's funny conversation, of course. But overall, I don't believe that. I believe exactly what we're talking about here. It's like, if this is the Patrick Mahomes world, clear as day. And then we are lucky enough to be in the very select few that it's quite literally, can we just get past that? And I would happily take it where we don't actually need to be the ones getting past it. Someone else takes care of the dirty work, and then we just slip in and handle the rest. That would be fantastic. But overall, that's where the world really lies. That's where it is. And anyone that speaks otherwise is just delusional and or just an online troll, and you shouldn't listen to them anyways.
Bills fans should feel lucky they have one of the only guys in the sport that on his best day can go toe to toe with Mahomes.
Yeah.
And that's a great place to be because not every team has that. Most teams don't. All right, Luca. I don't put a lot of stock in these lists. I think that they're good conversation starters. I do think the one NFL top 100 is interesting from the player perspective. Madden is what it is. It comes out at a great time of year every year where it's like mid-August. You're just looking for something to talk on. Don't get offended, Bills fans. I just banged into my mic after realizing 5 minutes ago my leg was on the desk doing this. So like the picture in the back looked like I'm having an earthquake. I was like, oh wow, they can all see that because I have that nervous leg shake going on. Deion Dawkins, by the way, congratulations on making it to the top 100, number 96. You love to see that. Bills kind of got the short end of the stick in the Madden range. We're not going to go through it all. It is what it is. A lot of that has to do with unless you go out there and you become like an all pro or you're like all rookie, they really do want to take like 2-3 year sample sizes before they increase your ratings super, super greatly. I think the biggest one for the Bills right now is Terrell Bernard being a 74. I really don't have a problem with Ed Oliver still being in the low 80s. I think that's pretty appropriate for him. Taron Johnson and Matt Milano being in the high 80s feels right. I didn't expect those guys to be in the 90s. Milano, maybe if he had played fully healthy, maybe he'd have gotten there, but did not happen. And, at the end of the day, like Lucas said, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And Madden updates the ratings every week, by the way. So just keep that in mind. All right, Luca, let's get out of here. The next time we talk, the Bills will have already played a preseason game against those Chicago Bears. Any final thoughts heading into preseason? Anything Bills related? Anything on your mind?
No, not really. I mean, I'm just excited that we're getting to an actual game. I'm going to be like you where I have to watch it afterwards. I'm probably not even going to just watch the full thing. I'm just going to look for notable plays, the extended highlight clip, videos where it's like, hey, here's this nice 10-minute YouTube video to just show you notable things that happened today. It's like, that's perfect. That's the way to consume preseason football, ladies and gentlemen. Do not. Oh no, I'm kidding. The way to consume it's actually going to the game, having a good day drink, enjoying the day, and just being happy that football with pads on is happening in front of you, because that ultimately means the real stuff is right around the corner.
And I will be the one that goes back and watches every single play, and I will watch them all 22. So don't worry, I got you. We will be covered on the show. I'm not proud of it. I don't necessarily enjoy it, but unless there's here's the one thing. I will not go back and watch the game if coming back from the engagement I'm at, if I find out like Josh Allen got hurt.
Oh yeah.
Nope. Because it won't matter.
Right.
Can you imagine Josh Allen gets hurt and I text you the next day and I'm just like, so I know we're going to talk about the Josh Allen injury, but we really should update the safety competition. Like, who gives a bleep? I don't care who plays in what position. If Josh Allen's gone, just set the whole thing on fire. We'll see at the draft.
Yeah, it's just instantly, is this year a loss?
Yeah. Is this? Yes. The year is a loss if Josh Allen gets hurt. No, Mitch Trubisky cannot take the Bills to the Super Bowl. And yes, I would be actively rooting for the Bills to lose games to get a high pick with Mitch Trubisky. I probably wouldn't. I know I wouldn't mean that. But
yeah, high pick in one of the worst drafts of recent years.
I'm already mad about this imaginary world. All right, let's get out of here before it becomes a knock on everything, folks. I'm sorry to bring that bad juju. It's game week. Get excited. The Bills have a game coming up. Camp wraps up this week. Exciting times. Football season is almost here. For Luca, there he is. I am Josh McCarty, and we will talk to you next week on Bills Chat.